I want you to imagine something with me right now. Close your eyes if you can. Picture yourself standing in front of a mirror, and instead of seeing your tired reflection, instead of seeing the worry lines and the exhaustion from another month wondering how you'll pay your bills, you see someone completely different. You see someone who radiates certainty, someone who moves through the world knowing, absolutely knowing, that abundance is not coming to them, it's already theirs. Now open your eyes, because I'm about to tell you something that will sound absolutely impossible, maybe even absurd. But I promise you, by the time we're done here today, you'll understand why 3 simple words, spoken in just 30 seconds, have the power to restructure your entire financial reality. My name is Joseph Murphy, and I have spent my entire life studying the hidden laws that govern human consciousness and the universe itself. I've watched miracles happen, not the kind you read about in ancient texts, but the kind that happen to ordinary people, people just like you, who were drowning in debt on a Tuesday and found themselves with unexpected checks, job offers, and opportunities flooding into their lives by Friday. And the most extraordinary part? It all started with 3 words they spoke to themselves before falling asleep. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this sounds like another one of those magical thinking schemes, another empty promise from someone who doesn't understand what it's like to check your bank account and feel your stomach drop. You're thinking about all the affirmations you've tried before, all the vision boards you've created, all the positive thinking that seemed to do absolutely nothing, while your bills kept piling up and your dreams kept getting smaller and smaller. But here's what I need you to understand right from the start. What I'm about to share with you isn't positive thinking. It's not about pretending you're rich while you're actually broke. It's not about lying to yourself or ignoring reality. This is about understanding a fundamental law of consciousness that's as real and as reliable as gravity. And once you understand this law, once you truly grasp how your subconscious mind works and how it communicates with the creative power that shapes your reality, you'll realize you've been holding the master key to wealth in your hands your entire life. You just didn't know how to turn it. Now, let me share something with you that most people completely miss about money. They think poverty is simply the absence of wealth, that if you just remove the lack, prosperity will automatically flow in. But that's like thinking darkness is a thing that needs to be removed, when in reality, darkness is simply the absence of light. The moment you bring light into a room, darkness vanishes instantly. It doesn't fight back. It doesn't resist. It simply cannot exist in the presence of light. The same principle applies to your financial situation. Poverty isn't a thing in itself. It's the absence of the consciousness of wealth. And here's what's absolutely crucial for you to understand. You cannot fight poverty by focusing on poverty. You cannot overcome lack by constantly thinking about what you don't have. Every time you say, I can't afford it, every time you worry about bills, every time you check your bank account with anxiety and dread, you're not fighting poverty, you're actually reinforcing it. You're impressing that image of lack deeper and deeper into your subconscious mind. Your subconscious doesn't judge. It doesn't say, oh, this person is worrying about money because they want more of it, so let me give them wealth. No, your subconscious is completely neutral. It simply accepts what you give it and reproduces it in your external world. If you give it worry, it creates circumstances to worry about. If you give it fear of bills, it creates more bills to fear. If you give it the feeling of not enough, it manifests circumstances of not enough with absolute precision. I've watched people work 3 jobs, hustling from morning to night, barely sleeping, running themselves into the ground, and somehow they're always broke, always behind, always in emergency mode. And then I've watched others who work less, stress less, but seem to have money flowing to them from multiple directions. What's the difference? It's not effort. It's not education. It's not even opportunity, though that's what most people assume. The difference is consciousness. Consciousness is the water in which we swim. It's invisible to most people because they're so immersed in it. But here's what I want you to understand. Your consciousness isn't just your thoughts. It's deeper than that. It's the fundamental belief system you hold about yourself and the world around you. Let me give you an example. 2 men work in the same factory. Same job, same pay, same circumstances. One goes home every evening and sees himself as trapped. He tells himself, this is all I'll ever be. I'm stuck here. His consciousness is one of limitation. The other man does the exact same work, but he sees himself differently. His consciousness is one of expansion. 5 years pass. The first man is still there, bitter, complaining about his bad luck. The second man has moved on, started his own business, or advanced into management. Same starting point. Different consciousness, different reality. You see, your consciousness creates a kind of magnetic field around you. It doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects what you notice, what opportunities you see, what actions you take, and even how other people respond to you. A person with a consciousness of lack will walk right past opportunities that a person with a consciousness of abundance would immediately recognize. This is why affirmations alone often fail. People say, "I am wealthy. I am wealthy," while their deeper consciousness screams, "No, you're not. Look at your bank account." There's a conflict. The conscious mind is saying one thing, but the subconscious, your true consciousness, believes something else entirely. And the subconscious always wins. Always. The real work isn't in repeating words. It's in shifting the underlying consciousness. It's in changing what you actually believe about yourself at the deepest level. When that changes, everything changes. Your actions change because they flow from a different source. Your perception changes because you're looking through different eyes. And here's the beautiful part. Consciousness can be changed. It's not fixed. It's not determined by your past, your parents, or your circumstances. It's determined by what you consistently accept as true about yourself right now. And here's where it gets revolutionary. You don't need permission to change your self-image. You don't need credentials. You don't need to wait until you've earned the right to see yourself differently. You can do it right now, in this moment, while sitting exactly where you are. Think about that for a second. The person you've been trying to become through years of effort and struggle, you can assume that identity immediately. Not by pretending, not by faking it, but by deliberately revising the mental picture you hold of yourself. Let me give you a concrete example. I knew a salesman once who couldn't break through a certain income ceiling. Every year, the same result. He worked hard, stayed late, made calls, followed up, but always hit the same financial plateau. When we talked, I asked him a simple question. "When you think about yourself, what do you see?" He paused, then said, "I see someone who works really hard but never quite makes it to the top tier." There it was. His self-image was that of someone who tries times but doesn't arrive asterisk. And his outer world was simply reflecting that inner conviction back to him with perfect accuracy. So we worked on something radical. Every night before sleep, he would sit quietly and see himself as a top producer, not visualizing the money that comes later, but seeing himself differently. The way he walked into the office, the confidence in his voice, the quiet certainty that he belonged in that top tier. He didn't affirm it like a parrot. He didn't repeat empty words. He simply felt what it would be like to be that person. Within 3 months, something shifted. Not just in his results, though those changed dramatically, but in him asterisk. The way he carried himself, the conversations he had, the opportunities he noticed that had always been there but invisible to his old self-image. Think about it this way. When you change the inner picture, the outer world has no choice but to rearrange itself accordingly. The subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between what's real and what's vividly imagined. It accepts what you consistently impress upon it. And here's what most people miss. It's not enough to simply wish for something once or twice. You must saturate your mind with the new image until it becomes more real to you than your current circumstances. Let me give you another illustration. A woman once came to me struggling with chronic financial anxiety. She'd grown up in poverty, watched her parents fight over every dollar, and had internalized the belief that money was scarce, that she didn't deserve it, that people like her never got ahead. Even though she worked hard, saved diligently, she remained stuck at a certain income level. Her bank account seemed to have an invisible ceiling. I asked her to do something that felt ridiculous to her at first. Every night before sleep, I told her to imagine herself opening her bank statement and seeing an abundant balance, not a specific number that would create resistance in her mind, but a feeling of pleasant surprise, of relief, of deep gratitude. I instructed her to feel the texture of this new reality. What would she wear if she felt financially secure? How would her shoulders feel relaxed or tense? What would she say to herself when looking in the mirror? She resisted initially. It felt like lying, she said, like pretending. But I explained that her current self-image was also just a construct. Built from years of repeated thoughts and inherited beliefs, why not construct a new one deliberately? She committed to the practice. Every single night for 90 days, she impressed upon her subconscious mind this new image of herself as financially abundant. And then something remarkable happened. Not a lottery win or inheritance, that's not how this works. Instead, she started noticing things. A client mentioned an opportunity she would have normally dismissed. A skill she'd taken for granted turned out to be highly valuable in a market she hadn't considered. She negotiated her rate with confidence she didn't know she had. Within a year, she'd tripled her income. But here's what she told me that struck me most. The money changed, yes, but what really changed was me. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. I stopped undervaluing what I brought to the table. I started showing up differently. Not louder, not more aggressive, but clearer, more certain. When someone questioned my decisions, I didn't scramble to justify myself like I was on trial. I'd pause, consider if their input had merit, and either incorporate it or move forward with confidence. That shift, that internal recalibration, changed every interaction I had. People could sense it. They responded to it. Suddenly, the same ideas I'd been pitching for months started gaining traction, not because the ideas improved, but because I delivered them with conviction instead of apology. Here's what nobody tells you about manifestation. It's not about thinking happy thoughts until money appears in your mailbox. It's about removing the psychological barriers that prevent you from recognizing and seizing opportunities that are already around you. Your subconscious mind is either your greatest asset or your worst enemy. There's no middle ground. When your subconscious believes you're not worthy of success, it will sabotage you in 1,000 subtle ways. You'll sleep through the alarm on the day of the important meeting. You'll forget to follow up with that promising contact. You'll price your services just low enough to stay broke. Your mind will find creative ways to keep you exactly where your self-image says you belong. But flip that switch, reprogram that belief system, and suddenly those same mechanisms work in your favor. You wake up energized, you remember the follow-up, you charge what you're worth without flinching. You start noticing connections and opportunities that were invisible before, not because they weren't there, but because your mind wasn't calibrated to recognize them. I remember reading about a study where they gave people fake designer sunglasses and told half the group they were real and half they were counterfeit. Then they tested both groups for dishonest behavior. The ones wearing what they believed were fake designer glasses cheated significantly more. Why? Because they internalized a story about themselves. I'm the kind of person who wears counterfeit goods. That identity shaped their behavior in ways they weren't even conscious of. Your beliefs about yourself are those sunglasses. Every single day. Now here's where it gets really interesting and a little uncomfortable if we're being honest with ourselves. Most people have no idea what their actual beliefs are. They think they do. They'll tell you what they believe. But what they're really telling you is what they times think, times they believe. What they wish they believed. What sounds good to say at dinner parties? Your real beliefs? Those are hidden in your subconscious, running the show behind the scenes like a stage manager in a theater. And you know what the crazy part is? You can discover your true beliefs by simply looking at your life right now. Your results are a printout of your subconscious beliefs. If you're struggling with money, you have a belief about money that's working against you. If you're lonely, you have a belief about relationships or your worthiness that's sabotaging you. If you're stuck in a job you hate, you have a belief about your capabilities or your options that's keeping you chained there. This isn't judgment. This isn't me saying you're broken or doing something wrong. I'm saying your subconscious is incredibly loyal. It's just loyal to the wrong program. It's running software installed years ago, maybe decades ago, and nobody's bothered to update it. Think about your smartphone for a second. You update that thing regularly, right? New features, bug fixes, security patches. You do it without even thinking about it. But your mind? The operating system that runs your entire existence? Most people are walking around with beliefs installed when they were 7 years old. Of course, things aren't working the way you want them to. So how do we change this? How do we reprogram these deep-seated beliefs that are running our lives? That's where the real work begins. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. But first, you need to understand one more crucial thing about how your subconscious mind actually accepts new beliefs. Your subconscious mind doesn't argue. It doesn't debate. It doesn't sit there and say, well, I don't know if I believe that. That's your conscious mind's job. Your subconscious simply accepts what you repeatedly impress upon it with feeling and conviction. Think of it like this. If you tell yourself once, "I am prosperous," your subconscious barely registers it. It's like a whisper in a crowded room. But if you tell yourself the same thing every single day, with emotion, with the feeling of already being prosperous, with gratitude for the prosperity that is coming to you, your subconscious begins to accept it as fact. This is why affirmations work, not because they're magic words, but because repetition with feeling is the language your subconscious understands. I've seen people struggle with this for years. They say their affirmations like they're reading a grocery list. No emotion, no conviction, just words. And then they wonder why nothing changes. It's because their subconscious didn't feel anything. And without feeling, there's no impression. Without impression, there's no change. Here's what you need to understand. Every time you say an affirmation with real feeling behind it, you're making a deposit into your subconscious mind. One deposit might not seem like much, but day after day, week after week, those deposits add up. And eventually, your subconscious reaches a tipping point. It accepts the new belief as true. And once that happens, your entire outer world begins to reorganize itself to match that inner conviction. I remember working with a woman who had been struggling financially for years. She would say, "I want to be wealthy." But in the same breath, she'd talk about how broke she was, how unfair the system was, how people like her never got ahead. She was making deposits all right, but they were deposits of poverty consciousness. I told her, "You need to stop feeding your subconscious mind images of lack. Start feeding it images of abundance." She started saying every morning and every night, "Money flows to me easily and abundantly. I am open and receptive to all the wealth life offers me." But here's the key. She didn't just say the words, she felt them. She imagined what it would feel like to check her bank account and see abundance. She felt the relief, the joy, the freedom. Within 3 months, she got a promotion she wasn't even expecting. Within 6 months, she had started a side business that brought in additional income. Within a year, her financial situation had completely transformed. But here's what was most remarkable, and this is what I want you to really understand. The external changes weren't what transformed her life. It was the internal shift that happened first. She stopped seeing herself as someone who struggled with money. She stopped identifying with lack. She began to think from abundance rather than toward it. This is the distinction most people miss entirely. They think, when I get the money, then I'll feel abundant. When I get the promotion, then I'll feel successful. When I meet the right person, then I'll feel loved. But the subconscious mind doesn't work that way. The feeling must come first. The mental equivalent must be established before the physical manifestation can follow. Your subconscious responds to the nature of your thinking. If you think from lack, you'll create more lack. If you think from limitation, you'll experience more limitation. But if you think from abundance, if you feel the reality of your desire now, in this present moment, your subconscious has no choice but to bring forth corresponding conditions in your external world. I've seen this principle work in every area of human experience. I've watched people heal their bodies by changing their mental patterns. I've seen broken relationships restored when one person changed their inner conversation. I've witnessed careers transform, businesses flourish, and impossible situations resolve themselves, all because someone learned to work with their subconscious mind rather than against it. Think about the farmer again. He doesn't plant corn and then dig it up every day to see if it's growing. He doesn't stand over the field worrying whether the seeds will germinate. He plants with confidence, knowing that the soil will do what soil does. He trusts the process because he understands the law. The same trust is required when working with your subconscious. You plant your desire through feeling and belief. You water it with continued faith and expectation. And then you allow the creative medium of your subconscious to bring it forth in ways that often exceed what you could have consciously planned or manipulated. This is the profound difference between manipulation and manifestation. Manipulation exhausts you because you're trying to control every detail with your conscious mind. Manifestation energizes you because you're cooperating with an infinite intelligence that already knows the perfect way. I've seen people tie themselves in knots trying to figure out the how. How will I get the money? How will I meet the right person? How will the opportunity come? And in that frantic searching for the method, they block the very thing they're seeking. Your job isn't to know the how. Your job is to know the what and the why. What do you want? Why do you want it? What would it feel like to have it? Once you've answered these questions with clarity and emotion, you hand it over to the creative power within you. Think of it this way. When you eat a meal, do you consciously direct your digestive system? Do you tell your stomach exactly how to break down proteins? Do you instruct your intestines on the precise way to absorb nutrients? Of course not. You simply eat, and your body knows what to do. There's an intelligence within you that handles the entire process without your interference. The same is true for your desires. You impress the subconscious with the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and then you let it work. You don't micromanage the universe. You don't wake up every morning demanding to see evidence. You don't panic when things don't happen on your timeline. This is where so many people stumble. They plant the seed on Monday, and by Wednesday they're digging it up to see if it's growing. They pray for something, and then spend the rest of the day worrying about whether it will happen. That worry is a counterintention. That doubt is a weed in your mental garden. Faith isn't believing despite evidence. Faith is knowing before evidence. It's the inner certainty that what you've accepted in consciousness must externalize in your world. This isn't blind optimism or wishful thinking. It's recognition of a law as reliable as gravity. When you drop something, you don't wonder if it will fall. You don't hope it will fall. You know it will fall because you understand the law. In the same way, when you truly impress your subconscious mind with a desire, backed by feeling and accepted as true, you should know it must manifest, not hope, not wish. No. Your subconscious doesn't argue with you. It doesn't debate. It accepts what you impress upon it with feeling and conviction. When you say, "I am healed," and you feel it, see it, know it in your imagination, that's the seed planted. The harvest is inevitable. I've seen this principle work in the most extraordinary circumstances. A woman once came to me, riddled with fear about her financial situation. She was drowning in debt, couldn't see a way forward. I asked her a simple question. Can you imagine yourself free? Can you see yourself opening your bank statement with a smile instead of terror? At first, she couldn't. The present circumstances were too loud, too demanding of her attention, but I told her what I'm telling you now. Imagination is the workshop of God. You don't need to know how times it will happen. You only need to feel the reality of it being done. She began a nightly practice. Before sleep, when the conscious mind grows quiet and the subconscious becomes receptive, she would imagine a single scene, holding a paid-in full stamp in her hand, pressing it onto her final bill. She would feel the weight of it, see the red ink, hear the satisfying thud as it marked the paper. She did this every night with feeling, with conviction, with the quiet knowing that it was already done in the invisible realm. Within 3 months, a series of events unfolded that she could never have orchestrated consciously. An old insurance policy she'd forgotten about. A skill she possessed that suddenly became valuable in the marketplace. A negotiation with creditors that went impossibly well. To the outside world, it looked like coincidence, like luck. But you and I know better. She had impressed a new pattern upon her subconscious mind, and the universe rearranged itself to match that inner conviction. This is not magic, this is law. The law of consciousness. The law of assumption. Call it what you will, the principle remains the same. Your inner world creates your outer world. Not sometimes, always, but here's where most people stumble. They try this for a day, maybe a week, and when they don't see immediate results, they abandon the practice. They return to their old ways of thinking, their old assumptions about themselves and their lives, and then they wonder why nothing changes. But transformation doesn't work that way. Your subconscious mind is like soil that has been cultivated for years, decades even, with certain beliefs and patterns. When you plant new seeds, new thoughts, new assumptions, they need time to take root. They need consistent watering, consistent attention, consistent care. Think about a person who has spent 20 years believing they are unworthy of love. 20 years of that same thought, repeated thousands of times, imprinted deeply into their subconscious. And then they read a book, learn about the power of their mind, and spend 15 minutes one evening affirming that they are worthy and deserving of love. What happens? Nothing, not yet. Because that single affirmation, that single seed, is buried beneath 20 years of contrary belief. It's like planting one flower seed in a garden overrun with weeds and expecting a beautiful bloom the next morning. This is where most people give up. They say, "See, this doesn't work. I tried it and nothing happened." But they didn't really try it. They dipped their toe in the water and declared the entire ocean cold. Real change requires persistent, consistent application. It requires that you return to your new assumption again and again and again, regardless of what your physical senses tell you, regardless of what appears to be true in your external world. I have worked with countless individuals over the years, and the ones who experience genuine transformation are always the ones who commit to the practice. They are the ones who understand that repetition is not monotonous, it is powerful. Every time you repeat your affirmation, every time you return to your desired state in imagination, you are strengthening that impression in your subconscious mind. You are wearing a new groove into the record. And eventually, that groove becomes deeper than the old one. Eventually, your subconscious accepts this new pattern as true, and then only then does your external world begin to reflect this internal change. This is not magic that happens overnight. This is law, as reliable as gravity, but it requires your cooperation. It requires your persistence. Let me tell you something I've observed in my years of study and practice. The people who transform their lives are not necessarily the most educated, the most privileged, or even the most talented. They are simply the ones who refuse to give up on their mental discipline. They are the ones who, when doubt creeps in, and it will choose to redirect their attention back to their desired outcome. I remember a woman who came to me years ago, desperate and defeated. She had been trying to conceive a child for 7 years. 7 years of medical procedures, disappointments, and growing hopelessness. Her entire mental atmosphere was saturated with fear and failure. Every thought led back to what she lacked, what her body couldn't do, what would never be. I asked her one question: "Can you see yourself holding your baby?" She broke down. "I'm afraid to," she said. "I'm afraid to want it anymore." This is where most people live, in the fear of their own desires. They've been hurt so many times by disappointment that they guard their hearts against hope itself. But hope, properly understood, is not naive wishful thinking. Hope is the natural stance of a consciousness aligned with infinite possibility. I worked with this woman for weeks. We didn't talk about her medical history. We didn't analyze her circumstances. We focused entirely on building a new mental image. Every night before sleep, she would imagine holding her child, feeling its weight in her arms, hearing its breath, sensing that overwhelming love that only a parent knows. She would fall asleep in that feeling. During the day, whenever fear arose, she would not fight it. She would simply acknowledge it and return to her imaginal scene. Over and over, it became her sanctuary, her truth, her real world. The external circumstances became the dream, and her inner vision became her reality. Within 4 months, she conceived naturally. The doctors called it spontaneous and unexplained, but there was nothing spontaneous about it. She had saturated her subconscious mind with the feeling of her wish fulfilled until her entire being reorganized itself around that new pattern. Her body, her circumstances, her very biology responded to her sustained mental conviction. This is what I mean by persistence. Not the grim, teeth-clenched determination of someone fighting against reality, but the gentle, consistent return to your chosen state regardless of what the outer world seems to be showing you. Now you might be thinking, "But Dr. Murphy, doesn't this require enormous willpower? How can I possibly maintain this inner conviction when everything around me contradicts it?" And here's where most teachings get it backwards. They tell you to use willpower, to force yourself to think positively, to battle against doubt with mental effort. This is exhausting. This is why people give up. Let me tell you something that will change everything. Persistence in assumption is not about force. It's about natural return. Like breathing. You don't force yourself to breathe. You simply return to breath, again and again. Naturally, your subconscious mind doesn't respond to strain. It responds to impression. And you make an impression not through intensity of effort, but through consistency of state. Think of water wearing away stone. The water doesn't attack the stone. It simply keeps returning, keeps touching, keeps flowing over the same surface. And eventually, inevitably, the hardest stone yields. This is your model for persistence. Not the battering ram, but the river. I once counseled a man who wanted to heal his relationship with his estranged son. They hadn't spoken in 7 years. 7 years of hurt, of pride, of accumulated resentment. He asked me, "How can I change this? How can I make him forgive me?" I told him, "You cannot change your son. But you can change your consciousness of your son. You can persist in the feeling of reconciliation, already accomplished. So he began. Every night before sleep, he would imagine a phone call from his son, filled with warmth and laughter. He would hear his son's voice saying, "I love you, Dad." Not as something that might happen someday, but as something that is happening in the dimension of imagination right now. Some nights it was easy. The feeling came naturally, and he fell asleep in that beautiful state. Other nights, doubt crept in. The old hurt resurfaced. The inner voice said, "This is foolish. Nothing is changing." But here's what he learned. Persistence isn't about never doubting. It's about returning after doubt. Every morning, he returned to the practice. Some days it felt powerful. Other days it felt like speaking into a void. But he kept returning. And after 4 months, something shifted. Not in his circumstances first, but in him. He noticed he no longer flinched when bills arrived. He began making decisions from a place of calm rather than panic. He found himself saying no to desperation moves and yes to aligned opportunities. Then the external world began to mirror this internal change. A former colleague called with a consulting opportunity. A client he'd worked with years ago referred him to 3 new projects. Within 6 weeks, his income had stabilized. Within 3 months, it exceeded what he'd been making before. He didn't win the lottery. No miracle windfall appeared. But the path opened because he had internally become someone who expected provision rather than lack. This is what I need you to understand. Your subconscious doesn't respond to your wishes. It responds to your dominant mental attitude. It accepts as true whatever you repeatedly impress upon it with feeling and conviction. When you say, "I am prosperous," while feeling poor, you're not impressing prosperity, you're impressing the discord between the words and the feeling. But when you persist until the feeling shifts, until prosperity becomes your inner assumption, the subconscious accepts this new blueprint and begins constructing your outer experience to match it. Now, I want to address something many people struggle with. Visualization versus affirmation. Which is more powerful? The answer is neither and both. They're simply different doorways into the same room. Some people are highly visual. They can close their eyes and see detailed scenes as if watching a film. For them, visualization is natural and effective. They imagine the desired outcome with sensory richness, seeing it, hearing it, feeling the textures and temperatures of their imagined reality. Others find visualization difficult or forced. Their minds don't naturally create pictures. For them, affirmations, spoken or written declarations, feel more authentic. They repeat phrases that capture the essence of their desired state until those phrases sink below the surface of conscious thought. And still others connect most deeply through feeling. They don't visualize scenes or repeat words. They simply generate the emotional state of their wish fulfilled and rest in that feeling. All 3 methods work because they all accomplish the same thing. They impress a new pattern upon the subconscious mind. Now, I want to address something that trips up many sincere students of this work. They come to me and say, "Dr. Murphy, I've been visualizing for weeks, I've been affirming daily, but nothing has happened. Why isn't it working?" And when I question them further, the answer always reveals itself. They've been doing the techniques mechanically, going through the motions while their dominant feeling remains one of lack, of wanting, of hoping something will eventually happen. They've been treating prayer like a slot machine, pull the lever enough times and maybe you'll get lucky. But the subconscious doesn't respond to hope. It doesn't respond to future tense. It responds only to conviction, to the feeling of present reality. When you pray from a state of wanting, you impress upon your subconscious the pattern of wanting, and it faithfully reproduces more situations in which you want. When you pray from a state of having, you impress the pattern of possession, and your world rearranges itself to match that inner conviction. This is why I emphasize feeling above all else. You can visualize the most detailed scenes imaginable, but if the feeling isn't there, if you don't actually feel yourself to be the person who has already received, then you're simply daydreaming. You can repeat affirmations until your voice grows hoarse, but if doubt permeates every word, you're actually affirming the opposite of what you desire. The feeling is the secret. The feeling is the prayer. The feeling is what impresses the subconscious mind. Let me give you a practical example. Suppose you desire financial abundance. Most people approach this by thinking about money, visualizing bank statements, repeating "I am wealthy" while feeling poor. Can you see the contradiction? They're trying to convince themselves of something their entire emotional state denies. The effective approach is entirely different. You don't think about money at all. Instead, you think about what financial freedom would allow you to do and be. You feel the relief of knowing all your obligations are easily met. You feel the joy of being generous. You feel the security of knowing you're provided for. You inhabit the emotional state of a person for whom money flows freely and naturally, because feeling is the secret. Feeling is the language your subconscious mind speaks. It doesn't respond to your words. It responds to the emotional conviction behind those words. This is why affirmations alone often fail. You can repeat, "I am wealthy" 1,000 times, but if underneath those words there's a feeling of lack, if there's anxiety and desperation, your subconscious registers the feeling, not the words. You're actually impressing the opposite of what you want. The feeling must come first. The feeling creates the belief, and the belief manifests the reality. Now, here's where most people get confused. They say, "But Joseph, how can I feel wealthy when I'm broke? How can I feel secure when the bills are piling up? Isn't that just denial? Isn't that living in fantasy?" No, it's not denial. It's not fantasy. It's working with the creative law of your mind. You're not denying your current circumstances, you're refusing to give them creative power. There's a profound difference. When you acknowledge a problem only to turn away from it and focus on the solution, when you recognize lack only to immediately claim abundance in consciousness, you're not being dishonest. You're being intelligent. You're working with the law instead of against it. Think about an architect designing a building. The building doesn't exist yet. The land might be empty. But does the architect sit there feeling defeated because the building isn't there? Does he focus all his attention on the empty lot? No. He sees the finished building in his mind. He feels the reality of it. He walks through its halls mentally. He experiences the completion, and that inner vision becomes the blueprint that guides all outer action. This is exactly what you must do with wealth. You must see it, feel it, and experience it in consciousness first. The outer manifestation is simply the shadow cast by your inner conviction. Let me share with you a story that perfectly illustrates this principle. I once counseled a man who came to me in what he described as financial ruin. He had lost his business, his savings were depleted, and creditors were pursuing him relentlessly. Every morning he would wake up with a knot in his stomach, immediately thinking about all the money he owed, all the opportunities he had lost, all the mistakes he had made. I asked him a simple question. What are you creating right now, in this very moment, with your thoughts? He looked at me confused. I'm not creating anything, he said. I'm just facing reality. But that's where he was wrong. He was creating his future reality with every anxious thought, every fearful image, every worried conversation with himself. His consciousness was saturated with lack, and the universe was simply matching that vibration. I gave him an assignment. Every morning, before his feet touched the floor, he was to spend 15 minutes in a different state of consciousness. He was to imagine that his financial situation had completely turned around, not to deny his current circumstances, but to build a new mental foundation. At first, he resisted. Isn't that just escapism? He asked. Shouldn't I be facing my problems head on? I explained to him that he had been facing his problems for months, and it had only made them worse. What he hadn't tried was facing his solution. He hadn't tried living from the consciousness of abundance instead of the consciousness of lack. So he agreed to try. Every morning, he would lie in bed and imagine receiving a check in the mail. Imagine his bank account showing a healthy balance. Imagine the feeling of relief and joy that comes with financial freedom. He didn't try to figure out how this would happen. He simply felt it as though it were already true. Something remarkable happened within the first week. Not in his external circumstances, but in his internal state. He noticed he was sleeping better. The constant anxiety that had been his companion for months began to lift. He started having ideas again, creative solutions to problems that had seemed insurmountable. Within 2 weeks, David was offered a new position, not the one he'd applied for, but something better. The director of the company had heard about his work and specifically requested him for a high-level project. The salary was double what he'd been making. When he shared the news with his wife, she just smiled and said, "I knew it was coming." And here's what I want you to understand about David's story. Nothing about his external circumstances had changed when he started his practice. The economy was the same, his skills were the same, but his mental acceptance of prosperity opened doors that had been there all along, invisible to his worried, fearful mind. You see, your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between a real experience and one that you vividly imagine with feeling. When David felt the reality of prosperity during those visualization sessions, his subconscious accepted it as true, and the subconscious, believing in his prosperity, began to orchestrate circumstances, guide his actions, and attract opportunities that matched this new belief. This is not magic. This is the natural law of mind in operation. Your subconscious is constantly creating your experience based on your habitual thoughts and feelings. Change those thoughts and feelings, and you must inevitably change your experience. Now, I can hear some of you saying, "But Joseph, I've tried to think positively. I've affirmed things. Nothing happened." Let me tell you why your previous attempts may have failed. Most people try to superimpose positive thoughts on top of deep, unexamined negative beliefs. It's like painting a wall without removing the old, peeling paint underneath. The new paint won't stick. You must first become aware of the negative patterns. You must catch yourself in the act of poverty thinking, fear thinking, limitation thinking. Don't judge it, don't fight it. Simply observe it. Say to yourself, "Ah, there's that old pattern again." Then, gently, persistently, replace it with the truth you wish to experience. This requires vigilance, especially in the beginning. Your mind has grooved patterns, like a record that plays the same song over and over. You must consciously choose a new song until it becomes the automatic one. The choice to think differently is available to you every moment of the day. When you wake up in the morning, you can choose to affirm health and abundance, or you can choose to worry about the day ahead. When you interact with others, you can choose to see the divine in them, or you can choose to criticize and judge. When you face a setback, you can choose to see it as a lesson, or you can choose to see it as proof of your limitations. Each choice compounds. Each thought builds upon the last. This is why the change begins slowly, but then suddenly accelerates. You might practice positive thinking for weeks and see nothing, and then one day you wake up and realize that your entire life has reorganized itself around your new mental patterns. I've seen this happen countless times. A man comes to me drowning in debt, consumed by fear, certain that bankruptcy is inevitable. I teach him to stop affirming his poverty, to stop speaking of his lack, to stop rehearsing his failures. Instead, I instruct him to affirm abundance, to visualize prosperity, to give thanks for financial freedom as if it has already arrived. At first, nothing happens. His bills still pile up, his creditors still call. But he persists. He guards his mind like a precious garden, pulling out every weed of negative thought the moment it appears. And then, something shifts. An unexpected opportunity appears, a debt is forgiven, a new source of income opens up. Within months, he's not just solvent, he's thriving. What happened? Did the universe suddenly smile upon him? Did God finally decide to answer his prayers? No. He changed his consciousness, and his outer world had no choice but to reflect that change. The same infinite intelligence that created galaxies and orchestrates the seasons was always available to him. He simply learned to tune into it. This is not magical thinking. This is understanding how consciousness works. Your subconscious mind is like soil. It will grow whatever seed you plant in it. It doesn't judge whether the seed is good or bad, beneficial or harmful. It simply accepts and cultivates. If you plant fear, you harvest circumstances to fear. If you plant confidence, you harvest success. This is why we must become vigilant gardeners of our inner world. Every thought is a seed. Every mental image is a blueprint. Every word we speak to ourselves is either nourishment or poison. I've watched people transform their entire lives simply by changing their internal dialogue. One man came to me drowning in debt, consumed by anxiety about money. Every morning he woke up thinking, "I can't afford this. I'll never get ahead. Money slips through my fingers." And indeed, that was his exact experience. His subconscious mind was working overtime to validate those beliefs. I taught him a simple practice. Before sleep, instead of rehearsing his financial fears, he began to imagine the feeling of financial freedom, not from a place of desperation, but from a place of calm certainty. He would feel the relief, the ease, the quiet confidence of having more than enough. He stopped saying, "I can't afford it," and started saying, "I'm building my prosperity consciousness." Within months, opportunities appeared that he'd never noticed before. A former colleague reached out with a business proposition. He discovered talents within himself he'd ignored. His income doubled, then tripled. Did the universe magically drop money in his lap? No. His subconscious mind, now programmed with abundance rather than lack, guided him toward different choices, different actions, different results. This is the mechanics of manifestation, stripped of all mysticism. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. More precisely, you attract what your subconscious believes you are. And here's what most people miss. Your subconscious doesn't care about your goals. It doesn't care about your dreams or your vision board. It only cares about what you've convinced it is true through repetition and emotional intensity. You can write affirmations 1,000 times, but if underneath them lives a deep conviction of unworthiness, the unworthiness wins. You can visualize success while your inner voice whispers, "Who are you kidding?" And the whisper will always overpower the visualization. This is why feeling is the secret. The subconscious speaks the language of emotion, not logic. It responds to the feeling tone of your thoughts, not their surface content. Think of a child learning to walk. They don't sit down and analyze the mechanics of balance, the distribution of weight, the coordination of muscles. They feel their way into it. They tumble, they rise, they feel the ground beneath them, and gradually their body learns. The learning happens below the threshold of conscious reasoning. It happens in the realm of feeling and impression. Your subconscious works the same way. When you try to force it with willpower, when you push and strain and effort your way toward your desire, you create resistance. You're speaking a language it doesn't understand. But when you relax into the feeling of your wish fulfilled, when you inhabit that state as naturally as you inhabit your own skin, the subconscious receives the message perfectly. This is why I say to you, stop trying so hard. Stop fighting for your good. Stop pushing against closed doors. Instead, enter into the feeling. Marinate in it. Let it saturate every cell of your being. I knew a woman who wanted to marry. Year after year, she tried everything: dating services, introductions through friends, social events. Nothing worked. Why? Because underneath all her efforts was a feeling of desperation, of lack, of "I don't have." And that was the state she was faithfully reproducing in her world. When she finally understood this principle, she changed her approach entirely. Each night before sleep, she would feel the ring on her finger. Not imagine it, feel it. She would sense the weight of it, the warmth of the metal against her skin. She would feel the contentment of a loving partnership, the security of being chosen, the joy of companionship. She did this without strain, without demand, simply resting in the feeling as though it were already true. Within months, she met her husband in the most unexpected way, through a wrong number phone call. You see, the subconscious doesn't care about the how. It only cares about the what. You give it the feeling, and it arranges the circumstances. This is the great secret that transforms everything. You are not trying to get anything. You are accepting what is already yours in consciousness. You are claiming your good by feeling it to be true now, not tomorrow, not when conditions change, but now. The moment you accept it in consciousness, the subconscious mind begins to move heaven and earth to bring it into manifestation. It doesn't ask how. It doesn't debate whether it's possible. It simply accepts your conviction as its command and goes to work. I've seen this principle work in the most remarkable ways. A woman once told me she had been struggling financially for years. She had tried affirmations, visualizations, vision boards, everything the popular books suggested. Nothing seemed to work. When she came to me, exhausted and discouraged, I asked her one simple question. When you affirm prosperity, how do you feel inside? She paused, then admitted, "Honestly, I feel like I'm lying to myself." There was the problem. She was speaking words of abundance while feeling the conviction of lack. The subconscious doesn't respond to words alone, it responds to the feeling tone behind those words. When you say "I am prosperous" while feeling poor, you're actually impressing poverty upon your subconscious mind. The feeling is the language your deeper mind understands. I instructed her to stop all affirmations immediately. Instead, I asked her to spend just 5 minutes before sleep feeling grateful for things she already had. Not money, just anything that brought genuine appreciation. The warmth of her bed, the quiet of the evening, a kind word someone had spoken. Simple, authentic gratitude. Within 2 weeks, something shifted. She didn't get a windfall. She didn't win the lottery. What happened was far more profound. She began to notice opportunities she had been blind to before. A friend mentioned a job opening. She had an idea for a small service she could offer. Her perspective changed, and as her inner world transformed, her outer circumstances began to reflect that change. Within 3 months, her financial situation had completely turned around, not through magic, but through the natural law of consciousness expressing itself in form. This is what I want you to understand with crystal clarity. You are not manipulating reality. You are not forcing anything. You are simply allowing your consciousness to take its natural shape in the world around you. When you plant a seed in the ground, you don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You trust the process. You trust that the intelligence within that seed knows exactly how to become the plant it's meant to be. Your subconscious mind works the same way. Once you've planted the seed of your desire through clear intention and feeling, your job is to let it grow. Your job is to water it with faith, not drown it with doubt. Every time you worry about how it's going to happen, you're digging up the seed. Every time you check your bank account with fear, you're digging up the seed. Every time you tell someone, "I don't know if this will work," you're digging up the seed. The farmer doesn't stand in his field shouting at the ground, demanding results. He doesn't lose sleep wondering if the wheat remembers how to grow. He plants, he waters, and he trusts the intelligence of nature to do the rest. You must do the same with your desires. Plant them clearly in your subconscious through visualization and feeling. Water them daily with affirmation and faith. Then get out of the way and let the infinite intelligence within you bring them to pass. I've seen people sabotage the most powerful prayers by refusing to let go. They pray for something with beautiful faith, plant the seed perfectly, and then spend the next week worrying, doubting, and asking, "Where is it? Why hasn't it shown up yet?" This is like planting a garden on Monday and complaining on Tuesday that you don't see tomatoes yet. It's absurd when you think about it that way, but this is exactly what most people do with their mental seeds. The creative process has its own timing. Not your timing, not the world's timing, but divine timing. Your subconscious mind is connected to an intelligence that sees the entire landscape of your life. It knows the perfect moment, the perfect way, the perfect sequence of events to bring your desire into form. Your rational mind cannot see this. Your conscious awareness is like looking through a keyhole at a vast mansion. You see one tiny room and think that's the whole house. But your subconscious sees every room, every floor, every possibility, all at once. So when you've planted your seed, when you've done your inner work, the most powerful thing you can do is live as if it's already done. Not someday, not when it arrives. Now, this is what it means to walk by faith and not by sight. The outer world may not yet reflect your desire, but you carry yourself as the person who already has it. You think the thoughts that person thinks. You feel the feelings that person feels. You make the decisions that person makes. You live from that identity, and from that identity, everything changes. This is what the mystics have been trying to tell us for centuries. This is what every spiritual tradition points toward. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And what you are is determined by the identity you've accepted as true. Let me tell you something that might shake you a little. Every single limitation you experience right now exists because of an identity you're carrying that you don't even know you're carrying. That anxiety you feel? It comes from identifying as someone who's unsafe in the world. That financial struggle? It comes from identifying as someone who never has enough. That loneliness? It comes from identifying as someone who's unworthy of deep connection. And here's the thing that will set you free. None of those identities are real. Not one. They're just stories you've been telling yourself for so long that you forgot they were stories. You forgot you made them up. Or more accurately, you forgot that someone else made them up and you agreed to carry them. I remember working with a man who came to me absolutely convinced he was a failure. He'd say it like it was a fact, like it was written in his DNA. "I'm just a failure, Dr. Murphy. That's who I am." And I'd ask him, "When did you become a failure? What day? What time? Do you remember the moment?" And of course he couldn't answer, because it wasn't a moment. It was a conclusion he'd drawn from a series of events. It was an interpretation. It was an identity he'd assumed based on circumstances. I told him, "You're not a failure who's trying to succeed. You're success itself, temporarily confused about your own nature." That confused him at first. But then something shifted. He started to see that failure wasn't what he was, it was just a costume he'd been wearing, and once you see the costume, you can take it off. This is the work, my friend. This is the real work. Not affirmations, not visualization, not trying to get things. The work is seeing through the false identities you've been carrying and remembering who you really are underneath all of that. And here's what happens when you start doing this work consistently. The things you thought you needed start showing up, but they show up differently than you imagined. They come without the desperation, without the grasping. You realize you were never chasing the thing itself, you were chasing the feeling you thought the thing would give you. A woman wrote to me last month. She'd been trying to manifest a specific relationship for 2 years. Affirmations, vision boards, scripting the whole arsenal, nothing. Then she started doing the work I'm describing. She stopped trying to get the relationship and started questioning why she believed she needed it to feel complete. What she found underneath was a belief that she wasn't lovable as she was, that she needed external validation to prove her worth. She worked with that belief, not to get rid of it, but to see it clearly, to understand where it came from, to observe how it operated in her life. And something shifted. Not overnight, this isn't magic, but gradually. She started feeling more at peace, more whole, less like she was missing something essential. 3 months later, she met someone. But here's the part that matters. She told me she almost didn't pursue it because she realized she didn't need it anymore. The relationship came from overflow, not from lack. That's the difference. That's what happens when you stop trying to fill a hole and start realizing there was never a hole to begin with. This is why most manifestation advice feels hollow, because it's trying to pour water into a bucket with no bottom. You're trying to acquire things to fix a problem that exists entirely in your perception of yourself, and no amount of things will ever fix that. You could have everything you think you want and still feel empty if the underlying belief structure hasn't changed. The real work isn't about adding anything to your life. It's about subtracting the false beliefs that make you think you're incomplete. You're already whole. You've always been whole. You just forgot. And everything you've been doing to try to become whole has actually been reinforcing the belief that you're not. This is why all the methods fail. This is why you can affirm until you're blue in the face and nothing changes. This is why you can visualize for hours and still feel empty. Because you're trying to use tools to prove something to yourself that doesn't need proving. You're trying to manifest evidence of your wholeness when the belief in your incompleteness is what's blocking the manifestation in the first place. It's the most frustrating paradox in the world until you see it clearly. You want the relationship to prove you're lovable. You want the money to prove you're worthy. You want the success to prove you're enough. But the universe doesn't work backwards. Consciousness doesn't respond to begging, it responds to assumption. To the state you're occupying right now. And if the state you're occupying is, I need something outside myself to make me complete, then that's the reality that gets reflected back to you. Not because the universe is punishing you, but because that's the signal you're broadcasting. Every single thing in your reality right now is a perfect reflection of the state of consciousness you've been occupying. Not the state you want to occupy. Not the state you pretend to occupy when you do your techniques. The state you actually live in, moment to moment, when you're not thinking about manifestation. That's the state that creates. And here's what most people miss. That state isn't something you have to build or earn or qualify for, you just have to choose it. You have to decide that it's already true, and then let your entire inner world reorganize around that decision. Not because you're forcing it, not because you're in denial, but because you're finally telling the truth about who you actually are beneath all the conditioning and fear. You're not broken, you never were, and the moment you stop trying to fix yourself is the moment everything starts to shift. Because when you stop looking for completion outside yourself, you stop sending out the energy of lack. You stop radiating the frequency of I need. And that changes everything. It changes how you show up. It changes what you notice. It changes what you attract. Not through magic, but through alignment. When you're not desperate for someone to love you because you finally love yourself, you become magnetic in a completely different way. When you're not clinging to opportunities because you trust in your own value, doors open that you couldn't have forced. You see, the subconscious doesn't distinguish between what you authentically are and what you desperately pretend to be. It only recognizes what you genuinely believe about yourself in those quiet moments when no one is watching. That's where the real work happens, not in the performance, but in the privacy of your own mind. I've watched people spend years building impressive resumes, crafting perfect social media personas, networking relentlessly, all while harboring a secret belief that they're somehow not enough. And you know what happens? They get opportunities, sure. They might even achieve external success. But it never feels satisfying. There's always this nagging sense that they're one mistake away from being exposed, one bad day away from losing it all. Because the foundation was never solid. They built their house on sand. Here's what I want you to understand. Your subconscious is always listening to the story you tell yourself about who you are. Always. It's recording every thought, every internal reaction, every moment of self-judgment or self-compassion. And it takes those recordings and turns them into instructions for how to show up in the world. When you think, I'm the kind of person who always struggles with money, your subconscious doesn't argue. It doesn't say, well, actually let me present you with evidence to the contrary. No, it says, understood. Let me help you struggle with money. And suddenly you're making decisions that confirm that belief. You're overlooking opportunities. You're sabotaging potential income. You're playing small in ways you don't even consciously recognize. But here's the beautiful part. You can change the recording. You can change the story. Not with empty affirmations that you don't believe, but with genuine shifts in your self-concept. When you begin to see yourself differently, not as someone trying to become successful, but as someone who is fundamentally capable and worthy, everything shifts. I'm not talking about arrogance. I'm talking about quiet, unshakable knowing. The difference is enormous. Arrogance needs constant validation. It's defensive, brittle, always comparing. True self-worth just is. It doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't collapse when criticized. It remains steady because it's rooted in something deeper than external circumstances. And when you operate from that place, opportunities don't just appear, you finally have the clarity to recognize them when they do. So let's talk about how this actually plays out in the real world, not in theory, but in the everyday decisions you make. You're in a meeting. Someone dismisses your idea. In that moment, you have a choice. If your sense of worth is externally driven, you'll either shrink back or become defensive. You'll replay that moment all day, questioning yourself, wondering if you should have said something different. But if your confidence is internal, you simply take note. You ask yourself, was the feedback valid? Is there something I can refine? And if not, you move forward. You don't let one person's reaction define your competence. Or think about this. You're scrolling through social media. You see someone who seems to have it all, the success, the recognition, the lifestyle. If your confidence is fragile, that comparison triggers something. You feel behind. You start questioning your own progress. But when your self-worth is anchored internally, you can appreciate their success without diminishing your own. You understand that someone else's chapter 30 doesn't negate your chapter 5. This shift isn't about arrogance, it's about quiet assurance. It's the difference between needing to prove yourself and simply knowing yourself, and that difference is everything. Because here's what happens when you stop chasing validation. You start making decisions based on alignment, not approval. You pursue opportunities because they resonate with who you are, not because they'll impress someone else. You set boundaries without guilt. You take risks without needing a guarantee of applause. And that, right there, is what real confidence looks like. Now, I want to be clear, this doesn't mean you become indifferent to feedback or closed off to growth. It means you filter everything through a stronger foundation. You listen, you adapt, you learn, but you don't collapse. You remain centered even when the ground shifts. And when you live from that place, something remarkable happens. You stop attracting situations that require you to prove yourself. Instead, you attract situations that allow you to express yourself. You stop chasing and start creating. The energy changes. The results change. This is the real work. Not affirmations alone, not visualization alone, but the deep internal shift that makes everything else possible. Let me tell you what happens when this internal shift occurs. It's like a door opening inside you that you didn't even know was locked. Suddenly, possibilities that seemed impossible become inevitable. Not because the external world changed first, but because your internal world reorganized itself. I've watched people transform their financial situations not by working harder, but by working differently. A man came to me years ago, drowning in debt, working 3 jobs, exhausted beyond measure. His conscious mind screamed desperation every waking hour. I asked him to stop fighting for just 15 minutes each day. In those 15 minutes, he was to feel what it would be like to be financially secure. Not rich, not extravagant, simply secure, safe, free from the gnawing anxiety that woke him at 3 in the morning. For weeks, nothing changed externally. But something was changing within him. He began making different decisions. Small ones at first. He declined overtime that would have exhausted him, and instead spent 2 hours learning a skill he'd always dismissed as impractical. That skill, within 6 months, opened a door to a position that paid more than all 3 jobs combined. Was that coincidence? Was that luck? No. It was alignment. His subconscious mind, finally freed from the constant bombardment of panic and desperation, could perceive opportunities his conscious mind had been too frightened to see. The opportunities were always there. He had changed. This is what I mean by the deep internal shift. It's not about pretending everything is fine when it isn't. It's not toxic positivity or denial. It's about creating a space inside yourself where solutions can emerge. Your conscious mind is terrible at solving complex problems when it's drowning in fear. Your subconscious mind, however, is a problem-solving instrument of extraordinary power when you give it the right conditions. Think of it this way. A computer running too many programs at once slows down, freezes, becomes useless. Your conscious mind, running constant loops of worry, fear, and worst-case scenarios, cannot access the deeper intelligence available to you. When you quiet those loops, even temporarily, you're not escaping reality. You're finally able to see it clearly. This explains why some of the most successful people in history were also the most contemplative. They understood something fundamental. You cannot solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. The quiet mind doesn't just rest, it elevates. It takes you to a higher vantage point where solutions appear not through force, but through clarity. Think about the last time you had a genuine breakthrough. I'm willing to bet it didn't happen while you were grinding away at the problem. It happened in the shower, during a walk, right before sleep. In those moments when your conscious mind finally stepped aside and allowed your subconscious intelligence to speak. This is why meditation, prayer, contemplation, whatever you want to call it, isn't a luxury. It's not something you do after you've handled the real work. It is the real work. It's the maintenance required for your most powerful tool, your mind. You wouldn't expect a car to run forever without oil changes, yet you expect your mind to perform at its peak while drowning it in constant stimulation and stress. The modern world profits from your distraction. It thrives on your anxiety. Every app, every notification, every piece of breaking news is designed to keep you in that surface-level consciousness where you're reactive, impulsive, and easily influenced. The moment you step back into stillness, you reclaim your power. You remember who you actually are beneath all the programming. And here's what makes this even more profound. When you change your inner state, you don't just feel different, you become different. Your frequency shifts. The energy you emit changes. And because this universe operates on the principle of resonance, you begin attracting circumstances and people that match your new vibration. This isn't mystical thinking. It's cause and effect at the level of consciousness. The depressed person sees a depressed world. The anxious person sees danger everywhere. But the person anchored in inner peace, they see opportunity, they see beauty, they see potential. Same world, different lens. The question is, which lens are you choosing? Because I promise you, the lens you choose isn't passive, it's creative, it's generative. Your subconscious doesn't distinguish between what you vividly imagine and what you physically experience. When you replay failure, it accepts that as instruction. When you visualize success, it accepts that too. And here's the thing, it's always accepting. It never argues. It never says, "Are you sure about this?" It just says, "Okay, let me make this real for you." So if you're walking around thinking, "I never get the opportunities I deserve," your subconscious says, "Got it. Let me filter out opportunities so you don't notice them. Let me make you hesitate when they appear. Let me keep you consistent with that belief." But if you think, "Good things flow to me naturally. I'm always in the right place at the right time," your subconscious says, "Understood. Let me sharpen your awareness. Let me guide you towards synchronicities. Let me align your actions with this expectation." Same mechanism, different instructions. Now, some of you might be thinking, Joseph, this sounds like toxic positivity. Are you telling me to just ignore reality? No. I'm telling you to stop letting current reality dictate future possibility. There's a difference between denial and vision. Denial says, there's no problem. Vision says, there's a problem, and I'm capable of solving it. Denial ignores the obstacle. Vision sees through it. When you're in debt, you don't pretend the bills don't exist. You acknowledge them, but you don't let them become your identity. You don't say, I'm a broke person. You say, I'm currently experiencing a financial challenge, and I'm actively moving toward abundance. Feel the difference? One is a fixed state. The other is a temporary condition with momentum behind it. Because your subconscious responds to the feeling tone, not just the words. When you say, I'm broke, with resignation, you're programming poverty. When you say, I'm building wealth with conviction, even if your bank account says otherwise, you're programming prosperity. Your current circumstances are the echo of yesterday's thinking. Your future circumstances are being shaped by today's thoughts. So ask yourself, what echo do I want to hear tomorrow? This is why the practice of mental discipline becomes not just important, but essential. You wouldn't let someone walk into your home and rearrange your furniture, spray paint your walls, or tear down what you've built. Yet every day, people allow external circumstances, critical voices, and negative headlines to march right into their mental home and wreak havoc. Your mind is your home. Guard it. I'm not suggesting you live in denial or ignore reality. That's not what this is about. What I'm saying is that you must become selective about what you accept as your personal truth. Yes, challenges exist. Yes, difficulties arise. But you don't have to internalize them as permanent conditions. You don't have to make them part of your identity. When someone says, that's just how things are, what they're really saying is, that's how things appear to me based on my current level of awareness. Their limitation doesn't have to become yours. Here's a practice that has transformed countless lives. Begin each morning by asking yourself, what do I choose to accept as true today? Not what does the world tell you is true. Not what circumstances suggest is true. What do you choose to accept? If you choose to accept that opportunities are everywhere, you'll begin to see them. If you choose to accept that people are generally helpful, you'll encounter more helpful people. If you choose to accept that solutions exist for every problem, you'll discover those solutions. This isn't wishful thinking. This is conscious selection of your mental diet. This is understanding that your perception creates your experience, and you have far more control over your perception than you've been taught to believe. Think of your subconscious mind as a garden. Right now, as you hear these words, seeds are being planted. Some will grow into beautiful flowers of prosperity, health, and joy. Others, if you're not careful, will grow into weeds of doubt, fear, and limitation. The gardener doesn't plant weeds intentionally. Weeds grow from neglect, from lack of attention, from seeds blown in by the wind. Your mental garden is the same. If you're not deliberately planting what you want, you're getting whatever the world happens to blow your way. So tend your garden. Pull the weeds of negative thought as soon as they sprout. Water the flowers of positive expectation. Give sunlight to the seeds of your dreams by focusing attention on them daily. And understand this, the harvest is inevitable. You will reap what you sow. Not sometimes, not maybe, always. The law is absolute. You know what holds most people back? It's not lack of opportunity. It's not bad luck. It's not their circumstances. It's their belief that the law works for everyone else, but somehow doesn't apply to them. They read these truths and think, well, that's wonderful for other people, but my situation is different. My problems are unique. My past is too damaged. My present is too complicated. Listen to me very carefully. Your situation is not special in the eyes of the law. I don't mean that cruelly, I mean it as liberation. The law doesn't discriminate. It doesn't say, oh, you failed before, so now I won't work for you. It doesn't say, your childhood was difficult, so you're exempt from abundance. It doesn't say, you're too old, too young, too late, too anything. The law responds to consciousness, period. Your consciousness right now, not your consciousness 10 years ago, not what you might think tomorrow. What you are accepting as true in this present moment. I've watched people transform their entire lives in their 70s. I've seen individuals rise from absolute poverty to abundance. I've witnessed healing that doctors called impossible. And you know what every single one of them had in common? They stopped negotiating with the law. They stopped making excuses. They stopped waiting for permission. They simply assumed the feeling of the wish fulfilled and persisted in that assumption until it hardened into fact. This is your moment. Right now. Not when you finish this video. Not when you feel more ready. Not when circumstances look better. Now. Because every single moment you spend dwelling in the old story, you're using this magnificent law to perpetuate what you don't want. Every moment you're imagining the worst, you're creating it. Every conversation where you rehearse your problems, you're fashioning more of them. But the glorious flip side, every moment you dare to assume your wish fulfilled, you're building that reality. Every time you feel thankful for what hasn't yet appeared in the physical, you're pulling it toward you. Every internal conversation where you speak from your fulfilled desire, you're commanding the universe to conform. You are not a victim of this law. You are the operant power. You are the one deciding, through assumption, what manifests in your world. So decide. Decide right now what you will accept as true about yourself. Decide what state you will occupy. Decide what you will persist in feeling, regardless of current evidence. And then watch your world rearrange itself to match your inner conviction. Because it must. The law is absolute. Let me take you deeper now into something that most people miss entirely. They read these principles, they nod their heads, they understand intellectually, and then they walk away unchanged. Why? Because understanding is not the same as realization. Knowing about water doesn't quench your thirst. You must drink. The same is true here. You can know every technique, memorize every principle, quote every passage, but until you experience the actual shift in consciousness, until you feel yourself moving from the wish to the fulfillment, you're still standing on the shore watching others sail. So, here's what I want you to do right now, in this very moment. Don't wait for the perfect time. Don't wait until you finish this video. Do it now. With me. Think of one thing you've been wanting, one desire that feels just out of reach. Got it? Good? Now, here's the crucial part: stop wanting it. Yes, you heard me correctly. Stop wanting it. Because wanting implies lack, and lack is what you'll continue to experience. Instead, I want you to move into the feeling of already having it, not hoping for it, not wishing for it, having it, done, complete. This is where people stumble. They say, "But Joseph, I don't have it yet. How can I feel like I have it when reality is showing me the opposite?" And here's what I tell them. Which reality are you going to serve? The one you see, or the one you're creating? You cannot serve two masters. You must choose. The outer world is yesterday's inner world made manifest. It's old news. It's finished. You're looking at the result of former thinking. If you keep reacting to it, if you keep accepting it as your truth, you'll keep recreating it. But if you turn away from it, not in denial, but in higher knowing, and you persistently dwell in the new state, the outer must conform. This is the secret that changes everything. Your subconscious doesn't argue. It doesn't question. It simply accepts what you impress upon it. And right now, what are you impressing? Fear or faith? Lack or abundance? The problem or the solution? Choose deliberately, choose consciously, and then surrender the how.